Hi, this is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector. Uh, One of my pleasures of my job is to be able to meet really sharp marketers and share best practices. Today is no exception. I've got Mark Ogne here, and we're going to have a nice, candid discussion on ideal customer profile and kind of the magic that can happen to make the ideal customer profile more ideal. So thank you for joining us. Mark, how are you today?
Wonderful. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So if you can give a little bit of an introduction about yourself, about your background, maybe your background
Yeah.
about ABM and ICP, and maybe a fun fact about you that someone wouldn't know from LinkedIn.
Uh, wow. Okay. So this is the candid part.
It's a
Um,
good part.
I took a different route to become a marketer. I went from sales to really large sales. My biggest deal was $400 million annual. To general management, I built a $350 million e-commerce business at the dot-com days. And then I realized that with all the internet and the digital communication pathways, it was really cool because now I could start to use the skills that I had in terms of talking with people and understanding the nature of them on a more scaled basis. So I've been involved with marketing now for like 23 years. Um, Tend to be an innovator. And, so part of this innovation was with social media a few years ago and won some awards with employee advocacy. But the last 8 years have been really with ABM. And my approach has been, I think, really different from many of the other people that are known in the industry, which is I started with primary research. And that's the kind of the groundwork for what we're going to talk about today with the ICP. And the primary research was around how do we identify the things that people need to do? So, like selecting accounts, ICP today, that's one of those things. And then how do we develop kind of a Likert scale from low maturity to what we perceived to be high maturity, and then ultimately figure out what the revenue impact of the program was so we can correlate impact back to tactics and how things were done. And today we're going to talk about one or two of the areas of this research around ICP, but that's been kind of I'm a vendor agnostic, fact-based person when it comes to, I'm not waving my hands and flipping things and coming up with new acronyms and all that. I'm trying to go back to like, what does the data show? Like, based upon thousands of programs, how is it that we should recommend that you look at things like today, the ICP?
Beautiful, beautiful. And how about a fun fact?
No, yeah. Learned to ride a unicycle when I was 8. Took a
Nice.
long
You
time.
still able to do it?
I was a very determined 8-year-old kid. It took a long time, but I learned how to do it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this so hopefully this will be easier than riding a unicycle.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell me about ICP. What is ICP, and how does it compare to like
Yeah.
total addressable market and so forth?
So, in workshops that I do, I'll have these like Venn circles, and total addressable market is anybody that could plausibly rationalize giving you any money for what you do. And that's a pretty big universe. Now, within the total addressable market, there's a group of people that hear your value proposition better, need what you have faster, are willing to pay more for it and stay longer. Now we're talking about kind of a customer lifetime value, the kind of influence to how you select accounts. And what's happening, I believe, is that a lot of people are not even really going to TAM. They're just looking at, what do we have in Salesforce, or what are the sales team, what do they want us to focus on? And part of this, my advocacy here is you need to have some type of a data-driven rationale for why you have selected accounts. And then there's a few other steps I guess we'll get to in a little while about what you do with that, how you operationalize it.
Yeah. So the total addressable market seems to be people that may be interested in your product. The ICP is a subset of that, and those are people that you would want them as customers, maybe.
Indeed. Now, one of the things, this sounds like really boring, but I've been into strategic marketing for a long time. And one of those things that you look at is customer portfolio analysis. Sounds like a lot of big words, but basically what you're trying to say is let's line up our clients from most profitable to least profitable. And what you find just every time is that there's roughly 20, 25% that cost you most of your profit, and that there's 30-40% or so that make you all your profit. And there's something in the middle where it's from making a little bit of money to losing a little bit of money. And the TAM aspect that's outside the ICP Venn is those people that are losing money for you. Now, I read somebody's dissertation. It was really cool information, but it was about cross-sell and upsell as a PhD in some business practice. And she found that the same proportion of unprofitable customers make it through into cross-sell and upsell. So not only are we spending money and time trying to onboard people that we lose money with, we're also trying to cross-sell and upsell them.
And lose
And
more money with them?
and there's what?
And lose more money?
Exactly. I guess we'll make it up in volume, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's important to figure out who you want to work with because it's be a little bit more discriminating.
Yeah.
Not,
Now those ones that lose money, I mean, think of the times when, you see a sales rep in the late cycle, they need deeper price concessions, then they close the deal, but it takes forever. And then the customer success team gets them and the client's bitching all the time, and you have to redo whatever it is, the work you've done, and you're doing make goods, and then after a year, they're pissed off and they leave. And it's like, those are the types of people that it tends to be there's two different levels. One of them is some industries just don't need what you have. Industries, areas, business units, geographies, or whatever it may be. But there's a way to figure out not everybody needs what you have. It'd be wonderful to think that we're, not the case, but the reality is that's true. And the point of, I think a really strong point of this conversation today is to have that data-driven rationale as to how you select accounts, but then use that in the context of understanding, are these actually the people that make us the money, make us the profit? Because if you're focused on the right people, you end up with faster deal cycles, higher ACV, greater customer lifetime value, stronger retention. And this is just something that as marketing people, we miss very frequently. In fact, in some of the statistics, what we had found is that roughly 70% of ABM programs don't get this properly. So it's not a minority, it's actually a vast majority. And then you could even layer on, well, we'll get to the segmentation part, I'm sure, in a moment.
so let's put out a poll. And I'd like to get our audience to chime in as far as how are they doing as far as identifying and segmenting their ideal customer profile, and what is their maturity stage, if you will. So as we're letting people answer, we'll go ahead and keep talking. So when you're creating your ICP, what data are you looking at? Are you looking at behavioral data? Are you looking at demographics? Are you looking at the the cash register? What are all the pieces that are involved?
That was a rhetorical question to the audience.
To you.
Oh, me.
I'm just asking you while they're
Yeah.
answering their poll question.
So for me, I go to CRM first, and I'd like to do, a 24 or 36-month look back to figure out, opportunity to close to ACV, and then close to renewal. And then, have a bunch of other firmographic, maybe even technographic data layered in there where you can begin to identify, what are the ones that are really positive, and then try to isolate that to say, is it a particular global region? Is it a particular industry, a firm size, an adjacent technology that we like to be near? Is it a type of product that they've bought? Like invariably, it's like, Sherlock Holmes. You have to look for the clues, right? When you find the correct clues, you can get the correct answer. But if you walk into it and just presume, that you know the answer, or that it's going to be easy to do, that's not what Sherlock did. And he would always find that hair on the windowsill, that this, and it's like, and he had solved this huge conundrum because he looked harder than anybody else.
Well, there seems to be and there's also potential where there's some clues, if you will, that are, maybe they're red herrings. They're, people with blue eyes or wear certain shirts or whatever. And so going after the wrong clues could be a little bit problematic too, I assume.
100%. When you talk about ICP, I think when you're really getting down to the point of segmenting the ICP, you're also getting down to the persona level, right? So you may have, North American manufacturing companies, this revenue to that revenue, but then, tap the brakes because you might have two or three different forms of buying center within there. So you have to start to layer in the persona. Now, one of the things that is by far the hardest, in particular for a sales team, tends to be understanding the differences between these personas. And they tend to try to treat them all the same. And that's a whole nother story that we can go through. But Gina was asking a question a moment ago about ICP and nuances. Now, 100%. So I'll use as an example something that I've used in workshops in the past. A client came to me. He was head of marketing for an e-commerce infrastructure company. Now, specifically, what they did is they bolted onto the side of an e-commerce platform. And what they did was layer on, I don't know if it was third-party logistics or something that bolted onto the side of that. And he had a list of 3,500 target accounts and said, yeah, I want to run a pilot. So what should I do? Should I pick just pick 10% of them? I said, let's talk for a moment here. Let's understand a little bit more about your business. Now, in a couple of minutes of conversation, what we found is that there were like 20 different e-commerce platforms that they could integrate to, but that there were clearly three that they were more focused on. Wow, all of a sudden it just starts, opening up. And why was that? There were particular industries that these ones were in, and that their services, their technology really helped in a very differential way from other options. So while they could go after all 20 whatever, e-commerce players, they really wanted to focus on three. So what this did was it started to narrow down industries and also adjacent technologies. And very quickly became clear that a sense of priority into that initially, and I would call it an ICP list, but what he was doing was looking at this list as if it were a list. And the answer was it was probably 35 different lists, right? This is where a lot of the best practice gets missed. It's only when you start to take that ICP and segment it. So we started segmenting on one of the three players did mid-market enterprise, and the other two did just enterprise. So clearly there's a heavy focus on enterprise. There was an industry layer, I think it was retail. So it was retail, enterprise, 2 to 3 different adjacent technologies. And all of a sudden the picture started coming out from the data. And instantly he understood, no, it's not just you pick the top 10%. It's like I clearly now have like 30 or 50 or whatever accounts that I should be focused on. And now with this understanding, I don't have to go after them and say, hey, we're the world's best at, I forgot, maybe it was third-party logistics. We're the best at third-party logistics. He could now say, hey, for the Acme company e-commerce platform, we do the stuff that other people can't do, and it's really powerful because, and by the way, I want to show you a case study from somebody in the retail industry using our technology with this Acme company e-commerce platform. Like, how relevant is
Very
that?
specific. Very
Right.
specific.
And all of a sudden he became relevant from the get-go. And but I think I've kind of squashed that answer for a really long answer.
Good example. Thank you. So Gina, if you have further questions, let us know, but I think that was a good answer. So I've ended the poll. We've got, I'll share the results. So what's interesting is, I don't know if you can see the results, but most of the people are deeper down in the maturity cycle. Very few are just dabbling, but they're really in there. So good for them. Any thoughts about that?
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, it probably is self-selecting that people that are really interested in this are probably focused on it and trying to do better than others. So I think that's a kudo for a lot of people.
'Cause that's different than the whole market in general, right? The most
That's
people
correct.
are on the early stages.
That's correct. The the a couple of things to take into account when we're talking about ICP is that ICP is a static construct. And what I mean by that is you you create a set of accounts that you may have new entrants and you may have a few people leave, but by and large, you're looking at this as, okay, this is, this adjacent technology, this industry, this firm size. And while people can move in and out of that, it's not a planned thing. I think that a lot of people start to talk about ICP and target account lists by in layer dynamic attributes on top of it, like they show intent. Like, no, 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 no. That's an attribute of some segment within the list, but it is not a cause for the change of the list. And there's a lot of deep discussion we can have about, kind of like brand to demand conversations around how effective are we at creating brand awareness, which then, hopefully starts to influence topics of interest with intent and things like that. I see we have a question though.
Yep.
You know what? I think so. First of all, is James, I think it kind of cut off
James
there.
Miller. Hey, James.
Hey, is this the James Miller from DWA?
Yeah,
Um,
it's Merkel now, and Dentsu or whatever.
yeah. Oh, I've
Yep.
met James before.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
good guy.
the new segments without case studies. You know what? So there still may be attributes about a segment. Let's say that we don't have a case study from that retail organization, like I was mentioning about that other client, but we do have a case study about somebody using, that adjacent technology, that e-commerce platform, and maybe we're getting closer. But I think the main part is when you look at this as a monolithic list, you lose the ability to get granular and relevant with people. Now, you bring up a great scenario. I mean, if this were completely new, I would still try to isolate it as a segment because um because let me take one half step back. When you have your list, you segment it. What you're doing is you should be isolating your programs, against, e-commerce one, e-commerce two, retail, whatever that segmentation strategy comes to. Invariably, you're going to have some segments that work really well and some segments that fail. But if you set up the design of experiments so that you are able to see that, then you have now the ability to be able to turn off those things that aren't working well, push it back to product marketing and say, this is the result that we got with the content you came with. We need you to rework this stuff and come back to us and they'll activate that again. Now, the question I ask people frequently, and they'll say, hey, our ABM program, it's up 20%. Is that good? I say, I have no idea, because to the point I was making a second ago, invariably in that up 20%, you'll have one group that's up 60 and another that's down 40. However the number is going to work out. But unless you segment, you don't understand the down 40. And so, James, you know, setting it up this way allows you to test, and learn on that segment until you figure out what it is that's really driving them. But if you don't isolate it and you keep it with everybody else, one, you can't get granular enough and relevant enough with them. And two, you really don't know what their response, response structure looks like when it comes back. There it is, James. Um, we'll have to touch base soon. We want to target people to buy from us. Yeah, but I think that's a give and a take, right? So unless you go and find historically who are those people that need what you have, hear your value proposition better, pay more, need it faster, and stay longer. Like, it's our job to go and try to find that and isolate it. And at least you have then a data-driven or insight-driven rationale for why you've selected those people. And you have a higher probability of them being a better fit for you, to be those people that want to buy from you, rather than adding kind of just this oblique, group of people to a list, companies to a list, and then trying to market at them, and you can't tell really what's bouncing off of that versus what's getting lost. But I agree with you. I mean, that is our job as marketers, is to isolate these groups, right? Everybody is not important. We have finite resources, especially this year, very finite resources, right? Everybody's talking about budget cuts and, headcount cuts and all the, like, bandwidth is short, skill sets are short, budgets are short. Why? The first thing we should do is to figure out who are those cohorts within our targeting that aren't performers for us. Like, that's the first thing to cut out, right? And that's super low hanging fruit.
Yeah. And so Wayne, and nice to see you, Wayne. Just to reiterate something that Mark said earlier, we want to target people that want to buy from us, but we also need to be careful and choose people we want because they could be a drain. And even though they like us, we may not like them so much. Nothing personal, but it may not work out.
Yeah.
So more questions?
Okay. Yeah, so it may be here, Anurag, that the without the segmentation, that's really the link that takes you to operationalize the ICP into marketing programs, is to segment them into, this again, a lot of big words, sorry, but homogeneous cohorts. Like, you need to find people where, if I give audience one content package A, I expect answer B, like more or less. I mean, that's how you develop the relevance. So, but that relevance then becomes, how do you construct the programs? How do you measure the results of those programs? And when you've set up these segments, you've really, this is the step between ICP and how do you operationalize it. The segment sits in the middle. And that's where, like, let's even say that you don't have different content yet. You're using the same content. At least what you could do is to dissect and understand from, an opaque, conversion rate. You can now see the strata of high performing groups, low performing. Like, if you do the segmentation, you can get an understanding of where it's working. And then you can start to do things like, maybe you turn off those areas where it's not working, and then send it back to product marketing and have them rework it, get you new content. But if you don't segment, you can't understand the strata of response. And that's the critical nature.
Thank you. So, Mark, you mentioned insight-driven decisions and data-driven. Is that the same thing or a little bit different?
I think as a collective set of peers, we talk about data driven all the time. And really the answer is that we should be talking about insights driven. And it's kind of a semantical thing, but it's not. So data driven is kind of like, I don't know, if for some of us with gray hair, I mean, you remember big data back in the day. And the answer was, big data was actually the problem. It wasn't the solution. Big data was the problem that we needed to carve down to small data, which was insight. And the same thing exists here with marketing, is that, do we need to have every single freaking data point about every customer and get blinded by, numbers and spreadsheets and all that? Or is it our job to start to decipher that, whittle it down to understand what were the key learning points? So an example would be, hey, I have insight now that shows that we do really well at segment one, but not segment two. So I would say that gradient of understanding the difference between segments is actually insight that's been honed from data. Now, I had this conversation with Malachi Threadgill over the last couple of years, and I finally convinced him. He used to use data-driven marketing, and we convinced him that it was actually insights-driven marketing, and he uses that now, because fundamentally that's what we're there for. We are there to distill from the never-ending stream of data what it is that we need to learn, what it is that we need to act upon. What is it that we've learned from the data?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, data is a lot of it's noise.
It is.
And
Yeah,
some of it's useful, but then to distinguish it is that's the art, I guess. That's the
right,
trick.
right, right. Hey, Wayne Cirillo, I see you in there.
Oh, insights.
Yeah, yeah. I see a lot of friends in here today. This is great. Thanks for joining, Gina and Julia. It's awesome. Good to see you.
Yeah. So how do you identify profitability? I mean, revenue is fairly easy, but how do you know about the costs and the time and the problems that are related to the relationship?
So a lot of this is going to go back to what do you have available. Um, the some organizations have a robust ERP system that they're looking at profitability by customer. So in that situation, that becomes really easy to extract CRM data, do a VLOOKUP or put it in a relational database and like, okay, cool, I see what's happening here now. Without that, then you have to kind of look at proxies for it. It'd be rare without the ERP to understand, how much did customer success, time did they put in there? But, even if the only data you had was kind of ACV and the number of times they've renewed, you get closer, right? So I wouldn't let perfection get in the way of operationalization. Like you have to start with something. Now, um, and it tends to be that you find patterns in the data. So if you find people with lower ACVs, shorter lifetime value, like it tends to be that they head towards the less profitable. Can you determine the profitability? No. But is it enough where if you see outliers on the other side, which are higher ACV, longer, period of being a customer with you, I mean, it becomes a directional thing that you should probably start to prioritize and test. And again, coming down to that operationalization, the segmentation allows you a little bit more to understand, did that actually work?
Okay. So as far as segmentation goes, I mean, how many, I think you've mentioned you don't want to have just one ABM list or
Oh
target
no.
list.
But
How many
yeah,
do you want to have? What's an ideal number or what's an ideal segmentation distinguishing the different lists?
you know, there isn't a single answer because I've seen organizations where, like the gentleman I spoke about with that e-commerce company, he had a pretty refined list. He was down to like maybe 3,500 targets. And, through looking at the three adjacent e-commerce platforms in the industries, we found, maybe 12 out of that he was going to focus on, and that covered probably 60% of his target account list. So he developed a way where he could programmatically determine an area to focus on. Now, I think it's probably the remainder of the list or the totality of the list could be used then in a scoring methodology, right? So if we don't have any idea who this company is or what their adjacent technologies are, you probably want to funnel that lead into a different area for scoring so you can try to learn, hey, which of our adjacent technologies or do they connect to at all, or if any at all. Um, on the other side, I've had a client where they had 50,000 target accounts that were largely selected by salespeople, and it became more of like a dump truck, where they just kept putting accounts into, and they had no rhyme or reason to understand, how to separate them by region, let alone industry or anything. And so, 50,000 target accounts, I mean, holy cow. I mean, and they had like 12 adjacent technologies that they connected to. I could see there could be hundreds of segments within that. If you look industries and firm size and region and like, but doing that kind of diligence though would allow you to become relevant. So rather than saying, hey, we do e-commerce really well, you get down to that, like, hey, we do this really well, and here's somebody to talk about it, is a very different proposition. By the way, I have an article coming out in 5 days, I think, on Martech. It's talking about, are we looking for 20% more efficiency or a 200% better idea? And this is one of those 200% better ideas, right? So we could talk about a 20% better efficiency and turn a channel off, or put more in a different channel, by putting some type of automation in and made it more efficient. But everybody has 200% better ideas out there. And that's really the challenge of what this is. I think the best practice in the world is telling you should have a target account list. And I'm here to tell you, like, that is the lowest level of maturity and the lowest performing option you could possibly choose. And it's the starting point of your program. So you, from the very beginning, are starting down the wrong path. Your ability to get yourself back up into the right path, you have to go back to square one, reassess everything, and then start off again. You can't go from somewhere that's completely wrong and through efficiency get yourself back to the right spot. Does that make sense?
Does make sense. So it sounds like segmentation options include firmographics, like you said, industry, company size, maybe geography. Also,
Persona.
firmographic.
It could include persona as well.
Yeah, tell me
So
about personas.
yeah. So by persona, I'm kind of more around. So yeah, Julia, she'll laugh with this one, but the in an organization I worked at with her, there was kind of a lead gen persona, a demand gen persona, a channel persona, sales, marketing leader. We had several different personas. And the reason that you had to have these personas is that each one heard the value proposition differently. We could sell to each of them, but when you started a conversation with a demand gen person versus a lead gen person, you would have a very different proposition that you would start with. You'd have a different presentation you'd try to sell them on. The things that you sold them would be different. So what we did is, we generally had roughly, 5 or 6 industries, 4 regions, and then, 3 to 5 personas within that we marketed against. It became highly efficient. I mean, we had, I think, 8 people. We marketed in 6 languages in all 4 regions with a team of 8, maybe 3 consultants. But it was because we knew what we were going after, and there's a great degree of certainty. Now, what resulted from that was that 200% improvement. I mean, first year we hit our MQL goal like 5x. Next year was like 3x. And so it was one of those 200% better ideas. Okay, I'll pass it back to you. Good
So
memories.
wait, I'm curious. So how do demand gen people think differently than lead gen people?
I have a white paper that I've never sent out, but I should probably warm it up and put it out on LinkedIn soon. So the core difference is that both are necessary functions, but we have to acknowledge that they are different functions that we tend to conflate, and then we lose the strategic nature of demand gen, or we confuse the lead gen side. So demand generation is the strategy of trying to get people to raise their hand and then nurturing them to a state where they can become, potentially client ready. Lead generation is about just finding hand raisers and picking the hand raisers up. It is an aspect of what goes into demand gen, but it is not the totality of the hand raising that demand gen goes after. It's a signal. It's a signal that can be put into demand gen systems. So I have like I said, that white paper I'll have to, and it starts with something from Gartner, about the difference in there. But I'll have to send that out on LinkedIn so you guys can keep a.
Whoever's interested, I'll be glad to share it with you guys when it's available. So as far as personnel, so it sounds, within the target accounts, there's different people to target, and you need to reach them, and it's different messaging. And
Yeah.
some of them may be interested in price, maybe the CFO is interested in price, and IT people may be interested in security. So different messages for the different personas within that company.
I would look at the personas differently. In terms of like, where does the buying center emanate from? So we were working at a marketing technology and services company, Julia and I, and we could have sold our technology to or our technology and or services to the lead gen persona who had their own budget separate from anything else, or to a demand gen person. The solution set that we pitched to them would have been very different, right? And the needs that they had would have been different. So what I'm suggesting is each of those may have had then influencers like purchasing departments or a finance team or whatever around it, but kind of the core of the decision process emanated from a demand function versus a lead function versus another one of those functions. And so the persona here was to layer in, um, we start with TAM. We eliminate the ones that are not profitable or harder to close. We get into an ICP. Within the ICP, we start to segment it based upon attributes of the company, firmographics, technographics. There could be adjacent technologies. There could be many different ways that you start to separate these people with the objective of finding homogeneous groups, cohorts of people that might respond similarly. An aspect of that would be, where did that buying signal emanate from? So you're kind of getting down from the firm-based information. I've got a collection of firms. Now, which buying center type signals might I get? So within this one industry, firm size, geography, all of a sudden I have the case for us like lead gen versus demand gen function. I would separate those as segments and then create content and programs focused on the people with those personas at those companies.
Okay, so that's a core distinction.
Yeah.
What's driving it? And
Yes.
is there another aspect of maybe psychographic where different companies, maybe some of them are risk takers, some of them are followers, some of them have different priorities. How do you do you target them, and how do you find out what they're about?
There is work right now with AI models to try to figure out the psychographics of companies, and I think that's promising and interesting. If I would say though that um, and Julie, I don't have an answer on that. I have seen demos of stuff like that. I don't feel confident to give an answer as to what tools um, comprise that area. But if I were to say there's an 80-20 rule in here, right? The Pareto principle. The 80% thing is to stop looking at a target account list and get yourself down to segments. That's the 80%. Now, maybe even 90%. Now, that last part may be company psychographics. Are they risk averse? Are they, early adopters? Looking at their tech stacks. Are they big, small? Which becomes a part of technographics. But I would say that could become another way to further delineate your segments, but it fits with the process that I've been espousing, which is TAM, ICP, segment. And it fits within that. So might it be that it separates more segments? Possibly. But I think it's really a Pareto thing that you at least get to the point of understanding the segmentation. And then you can overlay psychographics at that point.
Yeah. So you mentioned AI, which is an interest of mine. Where does AI fit into this for both the segmenting aspects and the
Yeah.
messaging aspects, I guess?
So great that you ask. The last several months have gone super deep in understanding where I wanted to go and then starting to learn. I put up a blog post on my site. You can go to account-based.marketing. Um, and there's a one that shows a chart with like a regression line. Go down the very bottom of blog post, you'll see it there. But I put up a link to some training data that I built, so you don't have to use your own data. And if you don't have an enterprise, there you go, Bob. Thank you. Um, license, you don't want to put proprietary data up there without obfuscating it or, something, because they could use it as training data unless you really understand what you're doing. So I built training data there, and I was able to do all kinds of stuff, like have it create a cohort analysis, understand, individual sales team member performance, industry region differentials in industry and regional performance. Um, and it just created these beautiful charts, in demonstrations of analyzing the data very quickly. Um, so that is something that you could actually go and do as a homework project over the weekend, like get that training data and start asking the questions of it. Now, the one thing it will require is at least the ChatGPT Plus license, because you have to have code interpreter, which it's now an all embedded, multi thing. But without that, this won't be helpful for you. What else? So I see a clear path where it can help us to understand the performance type stuff, the proxies for um, profitability, so which cohorts stay longer, give you more money. And let's look at it by, and you tell me what are the attributes of those companies that it could start to give you cohort answers back. It does um, coefficient of correlation type analysis, like on the fly. It knows how to do it. It's really quite brilliant.
So I'm not sure I understand. So it would
Yeah.
you could give it like different companies and it would figure out how they're similar or different or
Yeah. So every marketer on the call here has access to, whether it'd probably be CRM data, we download and it'll say, you know, all the attributes of the company and revenue and all this type of stuff. I would take something like that, upload it, ask it to analyze it, comes back with information. It tries to find problems with the underlying data, things like that. And you can start to ask questions of it. Okay. So the questions would be like, hey, tell me, how you would cluster account cohorts within this data. It'll do cohort analysis for you, like literally just by asking it that simple question. And it'll say, here's the companies and how they break out. It's quite phenomenal. Um, so on my website, that image that it shows was just a simple prompt. It's showing, um, you know, um, I think it was revenue by region by month. And I said, do a regression analysis to show me the trend of the existing data and then extend it an additional 12 months. Like, boom, it's just like 5 seconds later, it gave me that answer, shows a negative trend. I can analyze it and say, what are the drivers of this negative trend? It'll start giving me answers. It's the APAC region and, losing accounts. Like it's literally that good. Now, the advantage I have is I've just happened to spend hundreds of hours trying to use it, so I understand how to do it. But I tried to democratize that by putting that blog post out and just show, by the way, this my key takeaway is you just got to start using it. You know, it, just start using it and you'll learn. Now, another path is everything that we do in touch will become AI driven. I have plugins on Outlook that are AI driven. I was telling Bob, my camera here actually has some AI functions built into it. Um, it's just going to be a part of your every day. It'll happen. I think what I'm trying to do though is to get ahead of the curve personally and professionally, and to help my clients understand how to develop the use cases. And that's the key point here. First, I wouldn't try to specialize in everything. I had Jasper, I had, Pi, I had like 10 different AI tools. And I resolved down to two, ChatGPT and Adobe Photoshop Beta. It's fantastic. Um, And within ChatGPT, now I'm trying to develop use cases that my clients find interesting. So we're doing stuff with competitive analysis. They have some really brilliant stuff there. Um, you know, analyzing differentiation of messaging. Um, the work that I mentioned about, underlying client data and developing the concept of the cohorts, the segments, and the analyzing, region, product, industry, firm size, salesperson performance, in like that is really, really brilliant stuff. And I've really enjoyed doing that.
Wonderful.
We
So
should have a whole session on that.
yeah, that's, I mean, I'm very interested in that whole AI stuff, and just seeing some of the use cases is I just it's gonna be really helpful. So we'll have more chats about that over.
That's,
So as far as messaging goes, what about channels? I mean, how do you identify what channels, how to reach people? Where should you reach them? How should you reach out to them? How often? Maybe some people it's not good to talk to, reach out too often. Others, I don't know.
you so I think the best answer is to go back to one of my original answers, which is, set up the design of experiment where you're isolating into relatively homogeneous groups. So the segmentation, I guess we can't assume that every region is going to respond the same, or that every industry is going to respond the same, or every, target persona is going to respond the same. But if you isolate these things, you begin to understand, so, are you can look at programs by segment to understand where your response structure is coming from. The key problem that we have as marketing today is that we're not segmenting. If you don't segment, you can't target. If you can't target, you can't measure. Like it is really the crux of what's driving malperformance in account-based strategies today.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, we're past my 45-minute mark that I had in my head. I don't know if there's any other questions. Anybody has any other thoughts you have on the subject, but it's been an excellent chat.
Thanks, Ben. Had a great time.
Anything, anybody else? What I can do is I'll turn off the recording, and you're welcome to stay after if you've got any questions you want informal. If anybody, I'll be glad to get everybody some of the documents that Mark's mentioned. I think they'll be really helpful. And we're gonna have more of these. We're gonna team up and have chats with other sharp marketers out there, and put together an ABM leaders panel discussion on ICP, which is it's an important topic. And so I look forward to that. That'll be later this quarter. So stay tuned for that. Unless anybody has anything else, I want to thank everybody. Mark, any last words of wisdom?
No, I'm really happy that people joined. I think that this is one of those 200% better ideas in a world where many people are focused on the 20% more efficient. To get closer to your target accounts, to understand why you target them, and set it up so you understand how well they respond to what you do, it is a 200% better idea that is being missed by more than 70% of marketers today. So I encourage you to reach out to me. You can find me on the website there that Bob put in, account-based.marketing, contact form there. Feel free to reach out. But it was great to see a lot of friendly faces here today that I've known through the past.
Oh,
And
by the way, I just noticed
yeah,
there's some Q&A questions. Um,
okay.
Gina had one. Snigdha had one.
Hmm.
Yeah, Gina can talk to you later. So yeah, Gina had a scenario.
Here's the scenario I think just deal with. You start with a company and they say RSTP has been defined, and here you go. You dig in and realize that the analysis doesn't include much data. Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what the data-driven analysis doesn't exist. Um, you know, I mean, yeah, so even if you took that list and segmented it and then understood what was working and not working. So even if you started by saying, hey, I'll take your list, and then you segment and you figure out what areas are working and not working, and then go back and say, hey, these entire swaths of our ICP don't perform. Why? Like, you don't have to be the troublemaker to start with. I mean, maybe you take it as given, but then do the next leg of work. Um, Another one from Singda. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. An ICP creation hack. So, I mean, frankly, I'd go back to CRM and just figure what have you done well already, and try to replicate what's worked. You could try to get fancy and add stuff on top of it, but you know, in a little bit longer than a lunch break, you could do the data analysis in Salesforce and come back with, well, here's the group of people that have stayed longest and paid us the most money. What do they have in common? And just get some type of a view of what has worked to this point. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that can work. Once you segment and figure out, like, hey, wait a minute, these ones here, actually, not all of them are performing really well. Or, this segment looks like it could also be like we can add on this other segment over here. Maybe we're going to grow the ICP because they're very similar. And then you add that as an experiment, a new segment program, against that segment. Did it work or not? And then let the numbers tell you where it's going to go. Okay, there you go. My pleasure. Hey, thanks, guys. Had a
Thank
good
you all.
time.
Appreciate it. And stay on for a little bit, Mark, and then
Okay, I
we'll
will.
start recording.